Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is BRN Weekly for Saturday, January 4th, 2020. Well, Happy New Year to everyone. This week, I sat down with Daniel Klein, Senior Technology and Consumer Products Reporter with The Motley Fool, about how to get 2020 off right from a financial perspective. Let's take a look.
Well, I think it's very important to take stock and know where you stand. So the holidays are over. Maybe you still have a little bit of travel. Schools don't go back until somewhere between the 6th in Florida here. So, you might have a little bit of travel left. But what you want to do once the holiday spending is done is sit down and see where you are. Did you build up credit card debt? Did you come out ahead and maybe somebody gave you a really great gift and that offset some of your expenses? Did you not spend a lot of money? Where are you? Are you in good shape? And do you need to make adjustments? Where's your retirement savings? Are you sending a kid to college at some point? Have you planned for that? So sit down, look at all your accounts, look at your income, and figure out, hey, in the coming year, is my income going to change? Am I likely to change jobs or get a promotion or take on a side hustle or sell a kidney or who knows what it might be? Don't do that one. That is a bad idea. But realistically, you can't make a fix if you don't know where you are. After you look at where you are, if it's not great, forgive yourself, because there is nothing you can do to correct past mistakes except make small gains going forward. So if you find that you're $20,000 in credit card debt and you're losing money every month, well, you can't cry over spilt milk. What you have to do is go, okay, how do I fix that in 2020? And it's very simple. You can either spend less, make more, or do some combination of the two. I would recommend a combination of the two. And we've always talked about this. Look at the low-hanging fruit first. And I am not a fan, and we've discussed this, of those articles that tell you, well, if you don't have a latte every day, you'll save. Well, that's true. But if a latte is very important to you, maybe eating lunch out isn't. Maybe you buy new sneakers 4 times a year instead of twice, and you could get away with making that change. So the first things you should do is look at those changes. And maybe it's very small stuff. Maybe you don't watch HBO since Game of Thrones ended, so you can get rid of HBO for a while. And you may find that when you do that, your cable company calls you and offers you 6 months free of HBO in exchange for still having you there. Yeah. So you want to make those little changes, but if the damage is deep, then you have to look at the bigger changes. Do you need to live someplace less expensive? Do you need to take in a roommate? Do you need to get another job? Do you need to really make a drastic, austerity lifestyle change? You want to figure out how to get where you're going. And where you're going isn't just surviving the week or the month, it's retirement, it's your future. So you might need to say, you know what, in 2020, I'm not taking a vacation. I'm not buying a new television. I'm focusing on paying down my credit card debt. And when it gets to zero, then I'll make a new plan. And you know what? It might take you more than a year to get to zero. And if that's the case, well, it might be time to think about a side hustle or doing some freelance work or all the other ways you could make money in addition to saving money. It's harder for families. And I think one of the things you have to do, even if you have relatively young kids, is if your lifestyle does not support your budget, you need to get the whole family involved in choices. So you could say, okay, I know we planned on going to Disney World this year, and we can still do that. But if we do that, here are the 10 things we're going to drop that we pay for now. Or you guys wanted all these streaming services. Well, if we're going to keep all those, we're going to get rid of cable. Or whatever those sacrifices and choices are, let them be a group effort, because you may find that you were very excited about the trip you were taking to the Grand Canyon, and your kids, frankly, would rather have Netflix and Disney Plus and 6 other streaming services because they weren't all that excited about the trip to the Grand Canyon or whatever it is. Or maybe they are willing to sacrifice to get to go see the new Star Wars land at Disney World or Disneyland. Whatever it is, it's easier to sacrifice when you have choices. When you're saying, okay, I'm giving this up so I can get that. And it's, of course, hard to make a young child understand I'm giving up a lot of things I like so my credit card balances could look better. So you want to try to balance it with some, a little bit of carrot and stick approach where they're sacrificing, but they're also getting things. It's also cheaper and easier to bribe kids the younger they are. I think it's important for kids especially to understand that for almost everyone, money is finite. So if we choose to live in a smaller home, that allows us to travel more. It's something we've talked a lot about in my house. I wanted to live downtown and was willing to sacrifice a lot of things in order to be walking distance to restaurants and nightlife and community events. So the size of our home was cut in absolute half from where we lived in Connecticut. And that hasn't always been great for my son, who liked having a big basement where he could shoot his Nerf guns and do all sorts of stuff. On the other hand, he also does live a half mile from a movie theater and lots of restaurants we like and lots of places we can go. So, of course, that was a choice that was made more for my benefit. But you also look at what making that choice did. Well, we got a lot of amenities, but we're paying less. So that allows us, I'm coming to you live from our other home in Davenport, Florida, which is near Disney World. And we have Disney World tickets and Universal tickets. And if I bought the $500,000 mini mansion on the golf course that I technically could afford, we wouldn't be able to afford all of those other things. So you have to give up some things to get other things. Yeah, and you need to know where you stand. So if you're 20, if you're under 30, here's what you should do for retirement. Make sure you're saving a piece of each paycheck, 10% if you can, but 5% would be fine. Make sure you save enough that if your company offers a 401k match, that you're maxing that out, because that's absolutely free money. Because when you look at how compound interest works, every dollar you save when you're young is worth dramatically more when you get to retirement age than it is for the dollars you save when you're 50 or you're 60. If you're 40, 50, 60, well, then you have to really look and make some hard decisions. Do I have any retirement savings? If I don't, what could I reasonably amass? Because Social Security, while it will likely still be there, perhaps with some changes, is only going to replace a very small part of your income. So, maybe 20%, maybe less. So you have to figure out, am I going to leave New York and move to Arizona or Florida? Am I going to live in a more modest home? Am I going to get rid of 2 cars and only have 1? And really make those budgets and figure out those things. Do I want to have a home, but an RV where I travel the world? Well, not the world, just the country. Very hard to get overseas in an RV. But you have to know what you want and where you stand to get there. And even if you're someone, look, I'm a writer. I never intend to retire. I imagine I'll slow down, but I won't. Well, who would stop doing something that's enjoyable? I'll appear on podcasts. I'll retire until I'll write until they don't let me do it anymore. On the other hand, what you can't predict is health. That could be everything from you break your ankle hiking to, God forbid, you have some sort of, mental capacity decline. So even if you're someone who does something that doesn't really lend itself to retirement, you still want to plan for a rainy day, for what if everything goes wrong? And, look, we've all seen it with people who are really healthy, something bad happens and all their plans are thrown out of whack. So you want to think about it, talk about it, but compartmentalize it. You don't have to obsess about retirement. You don't have to look at your balances every day, but you should know roughly, where do I stand?
Well, last Friday, I sat down with Ann Turgeson, Wall Street Journal reporter, to discuss some of her investigative reporting about teacher retirement plans. Let's take a look.
Oh, boy. Well, I've been working with a colleague, Gretchen Morganson, for months now, looking at teacher retirement plans, also looking at some of the smaller 457 plans for government workers. And we have 2 articles. The first one focuses on the role of third-party administrators. Since 2009, third-party administrators have become, more prevalent in the market and have kind of bigger gatekeeping jobs. And so we're looking at conflicts of interest that affect third-party administrators' willingness to, sort of recommend and push certain products, in particular, high-fee products through some of the preferred platforms that are offered in that market. And then the second article is about endorsement payments that some of the unions, like teachers unions and municipal organizations, sort of, National Association of Counties, that type of organization, that they receive endorsement payments from specific providers in the 403B and 457 markets in return for their endorsements. Right. So, often 403B plans, just focusing on those, they have a lot of investment options. And so, you maybe as a participant, a teacher, you kind of see a ton of options and you think, great. I've spoken to a number of teachers who think, great, it's like a 401k plan. My employer has probably vetted these options. But in fact, because of the nature of a lot of non-ERISA 403B plans, there isn't a lot of vetting that goes on. That third-party administrators are sort of often given that type of role to serve as sort of a gatekeeper in terms of what investment options are offered. And there are situations in which third-party administrators can receive, in some cases, like higher compensation for recommending certain providers or products, or in other cases, it's not necessarily that they receive higher compensation, but they'll sort of curate preferred lists that include only providers willing to pick up certain fees, like administrative fees. Right. So that way the school districts don't have to pay those fees, or the teachers don't have to pay them. And so I think from the perspective of a school district, it looks like a great deal. Here's this sort of free 403B account, but what's not maybe apparent to people who aren't familiar with the investing world is that a lot of the providers, almost all of them on that, those types of platforms tend to be higher cost products, because obviously they're making up for this free administrative service through fees that they're charging to the participants. So it's just looking at those types of practices, right? And it's not apparent because this is sort of marketed as a plan with where the administrative costs are zero. Yes, they're zero to the school district, or in fact to the teacher, but they're really bundled inside those fees, like you just said, that the teachers are paying. And it's just, I think it's just unfortunate because a teacher who's saddled with like a high cost plan, say 1.5%, or more a year, they might be a lot better off just paying a separate administrative fee and having access to low cost, mutual funds, the way that people in the 401k market increasingly do. Yeah, I meant to point that out. So my colleague and I also wrote an article about that. I think the SEC has been looking into third-party administrative arrangements and, looking at trying to look at the interrelationships between third-party administrators and providers, whether it's, and whether there might be sort of ownership in common that isn't so apparent, maybe. So I think they're looking at a number of things, including, the payments that third-party administrators receive, and possible actual kind of formal ownership relationships between the third-party administrators and other entities, providers in the 403B market. So I can't tell you a lot of the specifics, but I know they are looking carefully at that. Yeah. I mean, I actually looked up a whole bunch of different 403B plan, menus in this area, because I spoke to a lot of teachers in Westchester County and Long Island. And in the course of doing so, I looked up my own high school, my own school district that I grew up in's plan, and it's horrifying, really horrifying. And this is a district in Westchester County where I don't know what the average income in this town is, but it's high. So, I mean, the idea that the school district can't afford to somehow figure out a way to pay their own administrative fees, and they're going to rely on a menu where the third-party administrator says the administrative fees are free because they're being picked up by the providers, and and you're getting this list of very high-cost providers in turn, and it's sort of inexcusable. So I agree with you. There have been changes, and I think things probably have improved, but the bottom line for a lot of teachers is that they still don't have very compelling investment options.
When we come back, what is an investment and retirement consultant? Well, we'll answer this and a lot more, so stay tuned right here on BRN Weekly. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back. This week we learned about the very important role of investment and research consultant. And joining me was Cowen Associates Senior Vice President Rod Baer. Let's take a look.
Well, I have a great job that I love quite a bit because I get to work with plan sponsors. So the companies that sponsor a retirement plan for their employees, they used to have defined benefit or pension plans, and then the role of the defined contribution plan, the 401k, that came into existence. So I work on retirement plans, the traditional pension, and increasingly the defined contribution plans.
Right, and so you, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So the defined contribution plan is an increasingly important cornerstone of the retirement funding exercise that an individual has to work on their whole life. And it's important because it's highly regulated. It's important for society that individuals save appropriately. And so with that, it's a little difficult. So I advise the companies, the plan sponsor of the 401k plan, on what is the best funds to have on the menu, what's the most reasonable for their participant base, what is easy to use. We are learning all the time in this industry, so what is best practice? I go from client to client and talk about what we are seeing that works in the industry, and then we interpret regulations and help them comply with those. And we benchmark fees and do a number of things that, you know, they don't have the time to do. They're busy with their regular business, their day job. And so we enjoy working on those items, assisting the company, the plan sponsor, really all working together for the ultimate benefit of the participant. That is true. So there is a lot that goes into every aspect of setting up a plan and monitoring it day to day. Things change, sometimes funds change or have issues. So we do a lot of homework behind the scenes to brief the plan sponsor, our partner, our co-fiduciary, if you will, on what we see as the best recommendations for the situation at that time.
Yeah.
And so it is a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. We have the end participant in mind all the time. And not only do we do that because we enjoy the work and these are our colleagues and our friends and we want to have a program that works well for them, but there is a legal obligation. That fiduciary standard of care is a very high bar, as I'm sure you've discussed before. And so we work diligently to maintain that level of care for the plan, for the investments, for the fees, and again, for that ultimate participant who's out there doing their job. They're focused on what they do best. We want to focus on what we do so that the retirement is as comfortable as we can make it and as the participant can make it for their part. Yeah, good question. So what we do, we have about 200 employees. We are In the United States, of course, we focus on the U.S. We don't have international operations, but we do have some international clients. We work a lot with very large plans, so with state-level government plans, large corporations, Fortune 50 type companies, all the way down to smaller plans that have unique needs and have selected us to help them address, again, unique issues. So those are the types of clients that we work with for the retirement front. We also work with endowments and foundations and even interesting little capital pools that help pay for nuclear power plants to be dismantled and safely put to rest, in a few decades from now. So in doing that work and serving those clients, we have a fair number of investment specialists that look at asset class specialties. They use analytic tools to put together optimal portfolios that are really trying to extract the best return for risk taken. Beyond that structure work, we have a number of specialists that just review investment managers. Those are the folks, the Fidelities, the T. Rowe's, the Goldman Sachs of the world, who have funds that are actually doing the buying and selling of securities. So we analyze those managers and their products, and we make recommendations on which ones would be good fits for the structure and the situation at the moment. And then we have other folks that produce research and do publishing and try to make easy to digest short pieces with colorful graphics out of what is sometimes dense quantitative research. Yeah. So that's what we do. I am a field consultant. I'm one of 40 or so that fan out and service our 400 customers in the U.S. And in total, the assets that we advise on are around $2.5 trillion. Yes, that's right. Typically a quarterly basis to, when we've done the work and things are at a steady state, we're still monitoring performance. We're monitoring the investments from of course, a quantitative perspective, but also a qualitative perspective, looking for changes in the firm and the investment team. We're looking at the economy, macroeconomic issues. We put all that together in a report and deliver that to, again, our what is normally our fiduciary partner, the committee that is at the company or the retirement plan that is sort of ultimately in charge of the plan. And they've hired us or another consulting firm as an advisor to them. Right. So we deliver that update quarterly. And then when there are issues that arise, then we're there as needed to do whatever's needed. Oh, absolutely. But you're right. There's a multi-function representation at the table. The HR execs and senior leaders are there, and they're talking about the things that they see. They bring a wonderful perspective. Then you have the finance side, and they bring an investment perspective, right, in terms of, again, the theory and the quantitative pieces of how this is supposed to be put together. And so together at the table, we talk through the issues at hand. You're right, there are also business leaders. There are key representatives from different departments. It may be the physicians group or the group of, the truckers union at the retailer. A diverse group for our public plans. It can be various groups from various agencies in the state, for example. Some will be career members on the board, and others will be appointed by the governor and represent various initiatives for the state.
And in our last segment, we dive deep into union or multi-employer pension plans with Randy Dufresne, Chairman and CEO of Dufresne and Associates. Let's take a look.
Yes, actually, the minors is a separate provision, which is apart from some of the other relief measures that are currently under consideration by both the House and the Senate. But it did do one important thing, which is to take care of the mine workers plan, which was really at the point of headed for insolvency in the very near future. It, by making the change to that plan, which was possible because there was already appropriated funding for that plan, both in terms of their pension benefits and health benefits, coming from the Mine Reclamation Act, where employers who are in that industry and do strip mines, for many years they just abandoned the land the way it was. And many, many years ago, Congress passed a law requiring them to pay into a fund to rehab that land. That fund was very well funded, overfunded to some extent. And for many years, the mine workers trusts have been able to receive funding for health benefits for those retirees whose employers have left the system. The new appropriations bill extends that funding to provide a source of funding for the 92,000 retirees, in addition to the 13,000 people who are still on the health fund. So both of those provisions were taken care of in this appropriation bill. Yeah, there's no question about that. This is really a lifesaver for those people. And one thing to remember is that even though many of us are familiar with the benefits that are provided to skilled labor in the building trades in particular, where their benefit accruals are substantial, or the trucking industry where you could have earned several $1,000s a month, most of the benefits paid from the Mine Workers Fund are about $500 a month. Mm-hmm. So it's a very modest benefit.
Right.
And for those people, there was nowhere to go because the last I heard there were less than 3,000 employers or covered employees by signatory employers, and I think more recently one or two of them has gone bankrupt as well. So there was really no chance for that plan to have any mechanism to survive and to become solvent again. So government intervention was absolutely necessary. So it was a good move. What we're looking at really are two specific bills. One that was passed by the House, and that one is known as the Butch-Lewis Act. Right. That was named for a Teamster representative who was very active in this process. And the other one is a bill that hasn't quite made it in terms of being introduced yet, but there are technical white papers out there that describe what the proposal is all about. That's about as far as the similarities go. These are very, very different, distinct ways of approaching it. The first one involves making loans. The Butch-Lewis Act involves making loans, which have fairly restrictive covenants on how you can invest the money. The idea here is that you take a plan that can't meet its benefit obligations, you lend it money out of the Treasury at a low rate. They invest that in fairly low yield fixed income vehicles, and they are supposed to return enough money to pay the benefits at the existing levels, plus investment, plus the expenses of administration, plus paying interest back to the government, and then at the end of 30 years repaying the entire loan. So if you think about how much money you would have to set aside to fund all of those things for a plan that who currently has an investment allocation which is more traditional and has a higher yield, it's a daunting process there. Yeah. So those expenses are unlikely to get a lot of support when it gets to the Senate. On the other side, in the Senate, their provisions over there are more related to expanding a provision of ERISA, which was known as partition. Through partition, the PBGC would take over liabilities for employees who were originally employed by employers that are no longer in business, and so they're looking at ways of expanding that so that the money could come through PBGC. There would be some reductions in benefits, but to accompany that, this proposal also proposes increasing the guarantee levels. Currently, a 30-year employee according to the formula, would be able to receive a maximum of $12,870 a year. Under the new proposal, it would be closer to $20,000. Mm-hmm. So that provides some benefit. But on the downside, the new rules would impose additional fees that would raise the existing premium from $29 per participant to $80.
Wow,
which is a big jump.
Yeah,
that's significant. It would impose a variable premium on plans that are underfunded, and that would be up to it would be based on 1% of the underfunding, but the maximum would be no more than $250 per participant per year on the variable piece. There would also be another fee that would apply to employers and unions, who would have to pay $2.50 per month per covered employee. And then there's another fee that would be charged to the retirees themselves if their plans are seriously underfunded. Right. That can range anywhere from 3% to 10% of their benefit levels. So the funding of these benefits, the supports for the PBGC, is creating a problem for the employer community, because one of the things we have to remind our policymakers is that these are all employers who are in very competitive fields. Some of the industries, like construction, have very thin profit margins. They're competing against people who provide no benefits, in which case sometimes they can pay a higher wage. Right. So to keep and retain those skilled workers that they've trained is really pretty critical. So it really is a matter that we have a careful balancing act here, not to push the cost so high that the employers try to abandon it. Now, the other piece to that legislation is to include a provision that was originally proposed in the Multi-Employer Pension Reform Act that was passed in 2014, you mentioned earlier. Yeah. And that is, at the time, it was called the Composite Plan. It's also referred to as the GROW Act. It was introduced in the House last year and the year before. But the provisions there are to try to draw the best features of both defined benefit and defined contribution plans in order to allow these plans to move forward. It would eliminate withdrawal liability because the benefits would not be a defined benefit plan. Rather, it would be neither defined benefit nor defined contribution. Benefits would have to be paid in a annuity form, but the benefits could be adjusted based on the funding level of the plan. There are protections built into that to require funding at 120% of the projected actuarial liability. So there is some built-in buffer there. But that provision, I think, is really critical to the long-term health of multi-employer plans.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN Weekly. But we're not done, because tomorrow we've got our weekly podcast, BRN Sunday, where I'm joined by members of academia, financial services, and the media to discuss the issues related to retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and so much more. You're not going to want to miss it. So until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
But if you're tired of the same